Welcome back to the 67th online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peace Point with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, live streaming from our meditation centre in London. Last time you saw me, we looked at blessing number 25 on gratitude. With the Dhamma talk today, we'll continue with our series on enlightened living to the final blessing in the Instilling Oneself with Basic Virtues subsection, that is, number 26 on regularly listening to Dhamma teachings. So today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes, starting with a 20-minute talk to define regular listening to Dhamma teachings and the sort of people suitable to teach them. Then 30 minutes of meditation and 20 minutes on the marks of a good Dharma listener and the expected fruits of listening regularly to the Dharma. So today's blessing is the 26th step of the staircase of Buddhist practice entitled Regular Hearing of Dharma Teachings. Only having availed ourselves of the first 4 virtues of Group 7 of these blessings, it will be fruitful for us to go on to listen to Dharma teachings regularly. Since we have already done the requisite groundwork for the mind, in other words, instilled ourselves with the respect of blessing 22, which helped us overcome the tendency to find fault with others, the humility of blessing 23, which helped us to avoid overestimating ourselves so that we don't look down on others, the contentment of blessing 24, which equipped us to connect with inner happiness rather than materialism, and the gratitude of blessing 25, which allowed us to recognize benefits brought into our lives by other people and things. With this blessing, we finally sow the seeds of the Dharma by regularly listening to Dharma sermons. The idea of listening to Dharma sermons is to be able to use the teachings we hear as a mirror to evaluate ourselves, in order to know which virtues we possess and which we lack, the weaknesses we have and those we have overcome. In other words, so that we know in which areas we have room for improvement. Of course, the point of listening to a sermon is to depthen one's wisdom. However, wisdom is not an instant commodity. There are some things we don't understand immediately when we hear them, but that doesn't mean that listening to the Dharma is a waste of time, because the benefits may lie dormant for a while before bringing us delayed benefits further down the line. You would be right in thinking that listening to the Dharma sermons has objectives on many levels, namely to foster confidence in practice, to wake you up to the reality of life, to instill a sense of urgency about practice, and lastly, to help you identify where in your character you have room for improvement. To deal with each in turn, the first objective, to foster confidence in the practice, or as it's sometimes expressed in a more traditional Buddhist setting, to arouse faith in the Triple Gem, acknowledges that without a foundation of confidence, it is unlikely that you will see the value of the teachings to the extent that you would want to practice them. This sort of confidence is like a sword that helps you cut away unnecessary doubts and fears. It is in our natures to be skeptical, and potential doubts can run to the hundreds. However, if we are able to put aside the doubts for long enough to allow a few teachings to wake us up to reality, it will often be enough to overcome chronic problems in our lives. If you want to say the same thing in traditional Buddhist terms, you would say that the same benefits can be gained by having confidence in the path of practice or the Dharma, its pioneer or the Buddha, and the community of those who have followed the path to its completion or the Sangha. The second objective, to wake you up to the reality of life or to arouse the quality of what is called urgency, or in the Pali language, samveka, we recognize that most of the time our mind wanders about aimlessly. Dhamma teachings have the quality of stimulating the mind to wake up to the real nature of our existence, such as the imminence of our death. Such teachings can give people a sense of urgency to really get down to seeking the truth before it's too late. It is like matches in a matchbox which may lie together throughout their lives, but they never break into flame unless one is struck against the other. In the same way, people coexist with the cruel reality of life for years without learning anything from the experience. It's only when they receive some sort of transformative shock that they will get down to earnest practice to find a way out of that suffering. Dhamma teaching is a gentle way to provide its students with that transformative information, and irrespective of whether the fruits of Dhamma talks come quickly or slowly to the student, it is necessary for them to seek out opportunities to hear such teachings regularly. Finally, hearing Dhamma talks is a good opportunity to identify where you have room for improvement in your character. Hearing Dhamma teachings regularly will allow the ideas and attitudes we hear to ingrain themselves in our character and start to contribute towards a more positive set of habits, or what is known in the Pali language as Upanisaya, for a brighter future. Having heard teachings in theory, the idea is to reflect on the virtues learned as an objective mirror to examine the presence or absence of those virtues in ourselves, and to see whether the virtues we already have can be improved upon. For example, having heard a teaching about patience, one should use one's new knowledge with honesty to examine one's own character and assess the level of patience in ourselves. If you have some degree of patience in you, you should not exaggerate, because there must still be some things that cause you irritation. You might be able to put up with unpleasant things, but you might find it hard to say no to temptations. Listening to a Dhamma sermon, you will instantly be able to locate yourself on the spectrum of mastering a virtue. The general idea of this particular blessing is to encourage us to seek out opportunities and make time to listen to Dhamma teachings from accomplished teachers. So what we'd hope to learn from this blessing is the choice of appropriate things to listen to and the choice of appropriate times to listen to them. In terms of what we're listening to, the definition for the word Dhamma, which we also met up with back in Blessing 16, generally means Buddhist teachings as found in the Tipitaka. We need to find the time to listen to such teachings because Buddhist teachings are designed to help alleviate the listener's suffering in the long and short term. In Blessing 21, we heard that there are 84,000 headings of Dharma in the Buddhist scriptures. Not many of us could claim to have taken to heart even a 10th or a 100th of these. An enthusiastic person might know a handful of teachings by heart, maybe the 5 precepts and the 4 noble truths, but even if we are aware of the teachings, it doesn't guarantee that we've got around to practicing them for ourselves. So if you have the opportunity to listen to any of the 84,000 teachings you don't already have in your repertoire, it would be useful to take the opportunity to listen to as many of these as possible. In terms of when to listen to Dhamma teachings, there are 4 main times it might be appropriate to hear teachings. Quarter moon days, whenever unskillful states arise in your mind, when you're in doubt, or basically whenever there's a Dhamma talk being given. To look at each in turn, quarter moon days, Buddhist holy days, or Poya days as they're known in Sri Lanka, suitable for listening to Dharma include full moon days, new moon days, and quarter moon days. Such occasions are about 7 days apart, and you'll find a similar pattern of holy days in almost every religion. What is described as Sabbath days would be observed by Christians each Sunday, by Jews on a Saturday, and by Muslims on a Friday. The reason why all these religions seem to have a 7-day top-up of their religious teachings is that usually, even if someone starts out awestruck by a teaching, the inspiration will only last for a few days. Most people have so many other things on their minds that within 7 days, they will forget any spiritual teachings that they have learned, and at the end of 7 days, they will return to their old bad ways. If you listen to a teaching which recommends that you study conscientiously, maybe you'll keep up the conscientious behavior for a few days, but by the end of the week, you'll be back to your old laziness. It's the same for practically every good habit we set out to build up for ourselves. If we fail to receive a reminder from our spiritual teacher for more than 7 days, we start to relapse into our old ways. This is why it's no coincidence that there is a teaching every 7 days in all the religions I've mentioned. The second appropriate occasion to listen to the Dharma is whenever unskillful states have arisen in your mind. For example, depression or temptation towards self-destructive behaviors. If unskillful states arise in your mind, you should be quick to listen to a Dhamma teaching. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is. If you realize your mind has fallen under the sway of unskillful states, that is the right time to listen to the Dharma. It doesn't matter from where or from whom you listen to such Dharma, from a monk in a temple or from a lay person or even from your parents or elders. The important thing is that you cannot just allow your mind to run riot. You have to do something immediately to douse the flames in the mind. If you're feeling despair or just sorry for yourself, then you shouldn't allow that state of mind to continue. But you need to listen to some Dhamma teachings to prevent that negativity pulling you further towards behaviors that might be self-destructive. Supposing you're particularly angry with the neighbors, then you should go and listen to the Dharma before you do something you will regret later. If you ever fall under the sway of what the Vitakka Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya calls 3 sorts of unwholesome mental preoccupations, or akusala vitakka, then take the opportunity to listen to the Dharma without delay, whether it be preoccupation with sense pleasures or gama vitakka, when your mind is overcome with desire or sensual temptation, preoccupation with vengefulness or bhayapada vitakka, when out of anger you feel tempted to steal or slander another person, or preoccupation with violence or cruelty, or vihingsa vitakka, when you feel tempted to hurt or take advantage of others. The third sort of occasion to be quick to listen to a Dhamma teaching is whenever you are in doubt. For example, when you feel there is something missing from your meditation practice, or something spiritual you haven't understood, or you find something seemingly inconsistent in the Dhamma teachings that you've already heard. If you have doubts, then go to find a teaching monk or someone more experienced in the Dhamma practice than yourself, so that you can put your mind at rest. The fourth and final occasion when you should be quick to listen to a Dhamma teaching is whenever there is a sermon being given. If you hear that there is a sermon on Dharma being given and you know that the person or monk giving the sermon has genuine knowledge, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is or what time of the day it is, you should not hesitate to go and listen to such a sermon. It is a very difficult thing for anyone who truly understands the Dharma to arise in the world. To study the Dharma to the point of understanding takes time, and it may need to be catalyzed by a truly gifted teacher. A teacher also needs to be able to communicate what they've learned in a way that others can understand. If there is such a person giving a Dhamma teaching, then you should not hesitate to go and listen to what they have to say. If you hear that there's someone who has reached mental attainments, then you should see what they have to teach. But at the same time, remain cautious of those who advertise themselves as enlightened or masters of meditation. If someone is truly knowledgeable, has a good manner of practice, and has a gift for making Dhamma easy to understand, be sure to book yourself a place in the audience. Buddhist scriptures go further to enumerate the qualities of those effective both in teaching the Dharma and listening to it, of course, in 2 separate lists of 5. In the Panchaka Nipata of the Anguttara Nikaya, it is specified that those who are good at teaching the Dharma should have the following characteristics, and you can use these characteristics to ascertain the likely quality of any Dhamma teacher you are considering listening to. In brief, the 5 qualities of a good Dhamma teacher are that they should expound the Dharma sequentially, that they should give reasons for the Dhamma taught, that they teach out of compassion for the listener, that they teach without motivation for receiving something in return, and teaching without bringing themselves into conflict with themselves or others. So to deal with each in turn, the first quality of a good Dharma speaker is that they expound the Dharma sequentially. This means the speaker must teach the Dharma that starts at the listener's level of knowledge and become gradually more profound, rather than skipping over important subject matter vital to the listener's understanding. To be sequentially profound requires that the speaker has a real understanding of their own subject matter, is an effective communicator, and finally that they must have prepared and planned what they're going to teach in advance. It's not generally good enough just to speak off the top of one's head, and I must also admit that I have issues with the recent trend for VJ monks, whose sermon consists of going through a playlist of Dharma videos for their audience. The second quality of a good Dharma speaker is that they give reasons for the Dharma talked. It is not good enough just to repeat what you've memorized from a textbook or even from the scriptures. It is considered bad form for a Dhamma teacher who has not done any preparation to read out borrowed PowerPoints to their audience. A teacher has to be able to explain the causes and effects in any relationship, be able to categorize, analyze, generalize, and distinguish. When teaching virtue, it's only possible to explain something thoroughly if you have practiced it already for yourself. How can you expect to teach meditation if you never tried it for yourself? How can you expect to teach about the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts if you are unable to keep even a single precept for yourself? So if you're going to give a description or an example and you only have examples of what others have done and you can't add anything from your own experience, anything you say will carry very little weight with the audience. The third quality of a good Dhamma speaker is that they teach out of sincere compassion for the listener. The goodwill of loving kindness and compassion are the basic foundation of a good teacher. Supposing someone is very virtuous and can practice many virtues for themselves, like a Bajjhaka Buddha, but lacks compassion for their fellow man. Supposing they give up teaching as soon as the audience dwindles, then it may be that they lack sufficient compassion to teach others. Fourth quality of a good Dharma speaker is that their motivation to teach should not be to gain something material in return. A good teacher must not teach solely motivated by material remuneration in terms of wealth, Facebook likes, or fame. Some monks lose their interest in giving sermons if they are offered insufficient donations, which would be considered rather a mercenary attitude to a Dhamma teaching. Some are not interested in the income from their sermon, but would be disappointed if their audience is small. If there is a large audience, they will rise to the occasion, but if there are only a few in the congregation, they don't really bother what they teach and try to finish as early as possible, which is not very noble on the part of the monk. Giving Dhamma talks should not become a popularity contest. This is why, as a Dhamma teacher, if you can be contented, no matter how many or few come to listen to your teaching, that is one of the signs of a successful Dhamma teacher. The great abbot of Wat Phak Nam taught, if 1,000 turn up, we teach 1,000. And it can be tiring, but a few words can change the lives of many, so the speaker accrues a lot of merit, so that's good. If 100 turn up, we teach 100. It may not be quite so tiring, so that's also good. If a handful of people turn up, we teach a handful, so we don't have to speak so loudly and the atmosphere can be a little bit more informal, so that's also good. And if no one turns up, we sit for meditation and teach ourselves, so that's also good. The fifth and final quality of a good Dhamma speaker is that they should teach without getting into conflict with themselves or others. Sometimes when someone is teaching, if they are not firmly established in the virtues they teach, when they see someone they don't like in the audience, they might try to score points by publicly humiliating that person in the course of what they say. This would be an example of getting yourself into conflict with others. Others use giving sermons as the opportunity to boast or end up making a fool of themselves, which would both be examples of getting into conflict with yourself. This final quality characterizes the manner in which Buddhist teachings have always been spread around the world. The Buddha was particularly careful that monks never teach in ways that bring Buddhism into conflict with other religions. But that doesn't mean Buddhism is a religion of laissez-faire. It means that when teaching, one should choose one's explanations and subject matter with caution. If you ever hear that someone is about to teach who has all 5 qualities of an effective Dhamma teacher, then if you can take leave from work, go and listen to them without delay and without worrying what day of the week it is. So just before we come to time for our meditation today, we have time for a quick story that illustrates how the Buddha used special teaching skills to help one of his disciples who had been given up on by a less accomplished teacher. Once upon a time, when the Buddha was still alive, there was a monk called Cūlapanthaka who had ordained for 10 years, but had certain learning difficulties so severe that even after a decade as a monk, he could still not memorize even 4 verses of scriptural teachings. His elder brother, who was also a monk and who was already an arahant, despaired of Cūlapanthaka. He thought, "My younger brother has such a bad memory, he cannot even remember 4 verses. So what chance will he have of learning the chanting or any of the longer suttas of the Buddha?" Cūlapanthaka ended up being banished from the temple by his big brother and shunned because he wasn't considered worth his keep. Cūlapanthaka considered disrobing, but he came across the Buddha, who had seen the opportunity to intervene in the monk's predicament. Cūlapanthaka informed the Buddha that he was going to disrobe, but the Buddha asked him, "When you ordained, did you ordain for the sake of Buddhism, or did you ordain for the sake of your big brother?" Cūlapanthaka agreed that he had ordained for the sake of Buddhism, so he renewed his interest to continue in the monkhood. The Buddha looked back into the previous lifetimes of Cūlapanthaka to find the origin of his learning difficulty. It turned out that in past lives he was very intelligent, but he had become arrogant as a result of his intelligence and had often disparaged a fellow monk who was not so gifted. Consequently, the other monk despaired and disrobed. That act of karma had rendered him unable to learn himself in every subsequent lifetime. Buddha realized that to memorize any scriptures would be fruitless, so he found another way to teach the monk. To find a custom-made meditation, the Buddha looked back into previous lifetimes to see what Cūlapanthaka would be able to remember. Tradition has it that Cūlapanthaka in another lifetime had been a king, and that while going in a procession around his city, he had wiped the sweat from his brow with a spotless garment, which he wore, and noticed how the cloth was stained. The Buddha consequently decided to teach Cūlapanthaka the word Rajo Haranang, meaning sullied, and gave Cūlapanthaka a piece of white cloth with which to wipe his own head. The white cloth was blackened by sweat and dirt, and eventually Cūlapanthaka, seeing the impurity of his own body, had sullied the white cloth to make it black, developed dispassion towards his own body. Before long, Cūlapanthaka's mind grasped the idea of impermanence with the same ease that he had done in that previous lifetime, and his mind was able to enter the center of his body and attain the Dhammakaya inside, and he became an arahant on the spot. A little later, the Buddha and his monks were receiving their midday meal at the house of Jivara Gomarapaccha. But when the meal was about to be served, the Buddha asked everyone to wait, saying that there was still one more monk left behind at the monastery. A servant was sent to find him, and Cūlapanthaka, aware of this, contrived that the whole grove appeared full of monks engaged in various activities. When the messenger returned and reported that there's not one monk but many, he was told to discover which of the monks was Cūlapanthaka and bring him. But all the monks answered to this name, and the messenger was forced to return a second time without him. For the third visit, he was instructed, "Take the hand of the first monk who says that he is Cūlapanthaka." And when he did this, all the other avatars of Cūlapanthaka vanished. Only then did Cūlapanthaka's elder brother believe he was enlightened, since his younger brother had performed a feat of mental power by replicating thousands of images of himself, which in Pali language is known as Manomayiti. So now that we are a little more well-informed about what is meant by regularly listening to the Dharma and the ideal sort of speaker to teach on the Dharma, let's refine our quality of mind in preparation to be a good listener to the Dharma by settling ourselves down for 30 minutes of meditation, which today is a recent live recording of meditation on true relaxation. If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. If you'd like to start by finding a comfortable position for yourself in the meditation, you might sit cross-legged on a meditation mat, with your right leg on your left leg, or you can sit on a straight-back chair. In either case, your right hand should rest on your left hand, and the index finger of the right hand should touch against the thumb of your left hand, with your hands resting palm upwards in your lap. And close your eyes very softly, as if you were only half closing your eyes, similar to the way you might close your eyes to go to sleep. So never squeeze your eyes closed, and try to make sure there's no pressure around your eyes. And you might like to make a scan down through the whole of your body to make sure each and every muscle in your body is as relaxed as possible. Starting at the top of your head, scanning down through your body, relaxing each and every muscle as you go. And when your body feels relaxed, you can turn your attention to relaxing your mind. The best way to relax your mind is to imagine that you're filling yourself with happiness and joy, so that your mind feels refreshed, pure and clean inside, free of any worries or anxieties whatsoever. So we let go of all these things, at least for the time that we're meditating, allowing our mind to become empty, and imagining that inside yourself is just an empty space, without any organs or tissues, without any muscles or bones, just a hollow cavity inside yourself, or as if your whole body had been transformed into a sort of transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. And within this empty space of our body, we might cast our mind back to the picture we talked about a few moments ago of the bright sun shining in the sky, or something equivalent like a full moon, a shining star, a crystal ball, or something like a sparkling diamond, whatever comes easiest to you. And bear in mind that it may be more of a feeling than a picture. Some people say they feel the picture more than they see it. But in this particular case, we allow that inner picture, whether it's clear or vague, whether it's more of a feeling, to gently gravitate down within the space of our body until it comes to a place somewhere round about the middle of our tummy. This place inside us is particularly important because it's a place where the mind can become peaceful for a change. It's a place where the body and the mind can come into balance. In effect, it aligns with the turning point of the deepest breath. And it's also a place of wisdom within our body. So although the habits of our mind might be to wander all over the place, but now we give our mind a place it can come back to in a soft and gentle way, by resting it with that picture inside us, lightly and gently, consistently, the whole of the time. And if we are very gentle, if we do it in just the right way, then it'll conjure up a feeling of expansion inside ourselves. And by saying that we see something inside us doesn't mean that we use our eyes to see it. We see it with our mind's eye. And the actual eyes in our head still look ahead as they normally do, because they have nothing to do with the process of meditation. But if we touch very gently with our mind's eye, with that picture inside us, we'll start to have the feeling of expansion and spaciousness inside ourselves, leaving us with the feeling that our whole body seems to melt away into the atmosphere around us. If we reach a sense of perfect equilibrium in our meditation, we'll have a sensation of lightness and expansion inside ourselves. But if we have the feeling inside us that something is narrow or forced, blunt or stressed, then we shouldn't force ourselves to go further down that path in our meditation. It's better that we open our eyes and start all over again in a gentler way. If our mind wanders away from the center, we simply bring it back again each time. And if the inner picture disappears, then we just conjure up a new one. If the picture changes, then we just follow it in its new form. It's almost like a special TV screen that we have at the center of our body, which gradually warms up to give us a clearer and clearer picture inside us. So in the beginning you may not see very much, but it doesn't really matter, because if our mind is at a standstill at the center of our body, there will be a sense of contentment that arises in our meditation, whether we see something or not. And we'll feel like we'd like to stay with this feeling for a long, long time. Any sense of boredom with the practice will disappear. And it's telling you that you're on the right track in your meditation. In the meantime, there's no need to analyze or have a mental commentary on what's going on in the mind. And we also have to resist the temptation of trying to make meditation happen. Because in effect, the meditation will happen all by itself. We allow the mind to become peaceful all on its own, without trying to stare at the center of our body, without trying to use our eyes to see the object of meditation. Just simply maintaining our mind at the center gently and comfortably. If you have thoughts coming up in the mind, then do your best to ignore them. And generally they will become less all on their own. But if the thoughts are too many, simply to ignore. You might continue with that mantra recommended before by hearing the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, over and over again in the mind. If you find the mantra useful, then continue repeating it over and over again to yourself until your mind becomes more free of thought. And generally what happens is that as your mind starts to become more independent from the thoughts, then the sound of the mantra will die away by itself, almost as if you forgot to maintain the mantra. But if your mind is not quite still and it's still wandering to other matters, then it's possible that you need to keep up with the mantra. We continue by maintaining our mind lightly and gently in stillness at the center of ourselves. And often there'll be a sense of brightness or increasing illumination in the mind, something that stays with us during the meditation and sometimes even beyond that. Some people get up from their meditation, go on to other things, and the brightness still stays with them, even to the point that they can lie down to go to sleep at night and the brightness is still there at their center, as if it will remain bright there all night long. But often it makes us realize that the amount of sleep that we actually need may not be as much as we thought. The mind is energized and refreshed from the inner brightness. We may feel that we need only a minimal amount of sleep each night. Because mostly people feel they need 6 or 8 hours of sleep each night, only because they're not sleeping very deeply, because they're spending all night tossing and turning in their sleep, and their time of rest is not really very deep relaxation for the mind. But sleep in combination with meditation allows us to relax on a deeper level, almost as if the nervous system is already relaxed and rested by the time we go to bed. And although we may need an hour or 2 of sleep each night, we find that this is ample for the mind that has already touched a level of subtlety. And we find that the rest that we do have at night, even if it's a little, counts for a lot, because it brings a sense of joy and happiness to the mind the whole of the time. The nature of the mind, when it becomes more refined, is that it attracts our awareness inward into a more refined dimension. And it's something that can happen to the mind, whether we're sitting in meditation or lying down, whether we're walking, standing, or attending to other activities. For as long as our mind is focused gently at the center, in contact with that inner energy, then it's creating a sense of refreshedness in the mind the whole of the time. But for now, we continue to magnify and multiply the mind at the center of ourselves, touching gently in that central place of brightness or comfort, a place where the feeling of relaxation is strongest on the inside. Each to our own meditation, just for a few more moments in silence now, until we come to the appropriate time. Yet if your mind wanders off onto other things, each time you realize, gently bring your attention back again to the center of your body as before, bringing it back for as many times as it takes to build up that sense of connectedness between your mind and that special place inside you. That it doesn't happen instantly for those of us who are new to meditation is not much of a surprise, because our mind has built up a certain set of habits in our lives. Because of all the struggles and conflicts, hardships that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, the negative residue of all these things gets caught up in our mind, meaning that it doesn't come easily for us to iron out all the ruffles in the mind. But as we start to create a new set of habits in the mind, as we start to iron out those negative emotions, little by little it becomes easier. Little by little we are able to start to work with the mind in a way that goes deeper than just thinking. It's almost like dealing passively with the mind, dealing with the mind only by a feather-light touch, working with the mind without expectations, simply interested in how subtle the mind can become, gradually working towards refinement in the mind just by letting it be. So we work with the mind lightly and gently, bringing it back whenever it wanders, working with whatever inner objects the mind displays for us, with acceptance and understanding and compassion for ourselves, lightly and gently letting the thoughts die down into silence just for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. We allow our awareness to focus back down to the center of ourselves, making sure that our body and mind are still as relaxed as ever, engaging with the sense of brightness on the inside. It helps the whole of our body and mind to shine forth with the light of love and peace, beauty, happiness and joy. We engage with that special point at the center of ourselves that emanates a sense of light feeling of well-being and loving-kindness, more and more, brighter and brighter, spreading out from the center to the front and behind, right and left, above and below, shining forth, pervading us with the light of love and peace, happiness and joy, pervading our hearts and our minds, throughout our body and outwards across the land, to cover people, buildings, homes and villages, towns and cities, fields and forests, mountains and valleys, lakes, seas and oceans, from horizon to horizon, until it covers the whole of our planet. A loving kindness that extends deep into the ground, allowing the light to pervade deeper and deeper, embracing lives in all the layers of rocks and soil, stones and dust, no matter how insignificant they may seem, with the wish that all living beings may be well and happy, may be free from suffering. We continue to share this light of love and peace, happiness, beauty and joy, deeper into the water of the sea, deeper down to the ocean shores, allowing that light of loving kindness to perfuse the ocean waters, with the wish that all the aquatic beings be well and happy, free from suffering. We share this light of love, peace and joy more and more, allowing the light to expand without limit, embracing all, nurturing all, healing all, forgiving all without end. More and more we allow the inner light to shine forth, extending deeper into the sky, the atmosphere, outwards into the universe, with its stars, planets, suns and moons, expanding outwards into the entire galaxy, the seas of stars, reaching out to the entire universe with the wish that all beings living in this universe be well and happy, be free from suffering. We extend that light of loving kindness to every living being in the universe, with the wish that there may be peace amongst people, peace amongst nations. May we witness lasting peace, love and care in all hearts and minds, to bring peace to our planet within our own lifetimes. We allow the unbounded light of loving kindness to shine with an all-embracing light, more and more without end. As we are spreading our loving kindness, we might cast our mind back to the example in ancient times of an old hermit who used to retire to the seclusion of the forests for meditation, who also had the habit to favor the practice of meditation on loving kindness. And he used to practice loving kindness meditation by day and by night,
Whenever his mind was at ease, he would spread loving kindness, facing east with the intention that may all living beings in the direction in front of me, in the eastern quarter, even the smallest creatures, 2-footed, 4-footed, with many legs or no legs at all, be pervaded with my loving kindness. May all living beings enjoy happiness and be free from suffering. The next day he might spread loving kindness in the same way to the western quarter, to the northern quarter, to the southern quarter, upwards or below. And he spread loving kindness in this way in all directions, consistently and regularly, until it became his habit. The results of his loving kindness practice came back to him in many ways. Whenever he slept in happiness, as if slipping into deep meditation. The loving kindness would bring him joy the whole of the time, and he would have a dreamless sleep. If he ever dreamed, then it would be of auspicious things. And on waking, he would feel refreshed, free of sleepiness. And he always had a very radiant complexion because of his practice. If there was ever any danger in his midst, it would never harm him. And he was loved and respected by people, celestial beings, and forest creatures alike. He was able to enter upon meditation easily and attain the absorptions quickly, his mind coming to a standstill swiftly, because he was able to let go of external events easily. He never bore any anger or grudges towards anyone, and his mind was bright at the center of his body, brighter than the sun at midday. And as a result of his loving kindness, the forest became abundant with fruit. Even animals that were sworn enemies, like deer and tigers, that came into the vicinity of the forest, were able to coexist in harmony, because their minds were pacified by the loving kindness they felt towards one another. So these are some of the fruits of spreading loving kindness, which appear even during the present lifetime. So for the last few moments of our meditation, we take the awareness of the brightness that has arisen in our minds, remembering the feeling as well as we can for a few more moments in silence. Sabba Buddhanupavena, Sabba Dhammanupavena, Sabba Sankhanupavena, Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So to return gently to the subject matter for today on regularly listening to Dhamma Teachings, we turn now to look at the qualities of a good Dharma listener.
In other words, a person likely to get full benefit from hearing a Dhamma teaching. And in this respect, you might like to tick off the qualities for yourself. The person who is a good listener to the Dharma needs to have 5 qualities as listed in the Pattamattsa Dhamma Niyama Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya. In brief, that they shouldn't look down on the subject matter, the teacher's level of knowledge, or on their own ability to understand it. They should keep their mind in meditation when listening, and having heard the teaching, they should reflect wisely on everything they've heard. To deal with each one of these in turn, the first mark of a good Dharma listener is that they shouldn't look down the subject matter. If, for example, you think the teaching is too basic for the likes of you, you should remind yourself that each and every item of the Dhamma taught by the Buddha has the potential, if practiced, to lead to enlightenment. However, some people fail to see the teachings in sufficient depth, because they look down on the subject matter and thereby miss its true value. Some people, for example, think that the first blessing on not associating with fools just means being choosy about one's friends, and conclude that it's too simple to waste their time listening to. They have their own preconceived ideas about what fools are like, so they don't want to waste time hearing a sermon about such a subject. But in the eyes of those with a more profound understanding, even this single subject, practiced properly, can pave the way to nirvana. And looking at the teaching more deeply, they will realize that they must also give up associating with the fool in themselves, the part of themselves that is stingy, undisciplined, or too lazy to meditate. Effective Dharma listeners will never look down on the materials that they're taught. Second mark of a good Dharma listener is that they shouldn't look down on the teacher's level of knowledge. Just because a monk looks young or inexperienced, or their English is not very good, you shouldn't go thinking that there is nothing you can learn from them. Just because you are a senior citizen doesn't mean that you need to hear Dharma from an aged monk. It is therefore a great mistake to look down on the knowledge of a Dharma teacher. In order to help remind themselves not to look down on the knowledge of a teacher, in the olden times people would hold their hands in a gesture of prayer throughout the sermon they were listening to. However, in the present day, although Dhamma talks are a lot more informal, you still need to avoid falling asleep or chatting with your friends during the sermon, or else that is showing that you are looking down on the knowledge of the teacher. To assume you know better is to impede your own potential for spiritual progress. The Buddha warned in the Dahara Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya that there are 4 things which, although seemingly small and insignificant, nonetheless should never be underestimated. And these are a small fire, where a tiny spark can burn down an entire city, a small poisonous snake, which can deliver a fatal bite, a young king, who even as a baby can threaten the monarchy's line of succession, or a young monk, some of whom have been arahants since they were 7 years old. So don't let appearances deceive you. The third mark of a good Dharma listener is that you should never look down on your own ability to understand profound spiritual matters like the Dharma. In fact, even the most unlikely of people have benefited from Dhamma teachings to the degree that they could become arahants, like in the story of Cūlapanthaka that we just heard. Some people think that they have no chance of being able to transform themselves for the better, so they give up even before they start. They think to themselves that success in the study of the Dharma may take years, even for fanatics, so what chance would a lazy person like them have? The fourth mark of a good Dharma listener is that they need to keep the mind in meditation when listening to the sermon. This is why, for example, it is a complete waste of time to teach the Dharma to someone who is drunk. For best effect, you should avoid distractions during a teaching, even if it's chatting or picking your fingernails. The better your mind is concentrated in meditation as you hear the talk, the more you will understand about the subject being taught. In the time of the Buddha, when he needed to teach a very subtle subject, he would sit with his eyes closed in meditation to teach, and the listeners would do the same, in order to be able to follow the subtleties of his teaching. In this way, many people were able to attain the path and fruit of nirvana. In a similar way, we too should keep a mind of meditation when listening to Dhamma teachings in keeping with the age-old Buddhist tradition. And I should add that although we keep our mind at the center of the body, generally we don't close our eyes when we're listening to a Dhamma sermon. The fifth and final mark of a good Dhamma listener is that they should reflect wisely on everything learned. In other words, they need to have the quality known in Pali as yoniso manasikara, which means being a good teacher to yourself. You should reflect further on the things you have learned after the sermon, ruminating on the subject matter afterwards in your mind and examining it from different angles to assimilate it into your previous knowledge. Consequently, both the person who gives the Dhamma talk and the person who listens to it each have 5 points of practice which they need to apply if a Dhamma sermon is to give its maximum benefit. So turning now to look at the benefits accruing to those who listen to Dhamma teachings regularly, these can be divided into immediate benefits in this lifetime and delayed benefits that manifest in lifetimes to come. To examine the immediate benefits, first of all, according to the Dhamma Savana Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, there are 5 benefits that come immediately from listening to Dhamma teachings. In brief, hearing things you've never heard before, clarifying teachings you've already heard, dispelling your doubts, straightening your views, and calming the mind to bring happiness. To deal with each in turn, the first immediate benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is to hear Dhamma teachings that you have never heard before, or as it's known in the Pali language, asutang sunati. Because a Dhamma teacher will always endeavor to find new items of Dhamma for the listener, as we have heard previously in blessing number 3, if we listen to a Dhamma sermon, we will almost always be hearing something we have never heard before. The second immediate benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is to clarify Dhamma teachings we have already heard, or as it's known in the Pali language, sutang pariyoda peti. If it happens that the subject of a sermon is something we have already heard before, at the very least it will allow us to revise and depthen what we already know, and to raise our familiarity level, allowing us to remember more of the details. The third immediate benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is to dispel one's doubts, or as it's known in the Pali language, kankang vihanati. If after hearing teachings in the past, we are still struggling to give up old habits and strive for new better ones, as a result of hearing a Dhamma talk, some of our doubt and reluctance will be overcome. The fourth immediate benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is to straighten one's views, or, as it's known in the Pali language, ditthing uchung karoti. Because we are so mixed up with a world of delusion in our everyday lives, many false views can brush off on us. Such negative worldview, if left to its own devices, can eventually lead our spiritual cultivation to go in circles, or else deviate from the objectives we have set ourselves. One advantage of regularly listening to Dhamma teachings is that we are able to identify the workings of false view in our mind and to uproot it, establishing right view in its place. The fifth and final immediate benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is to calm the mind and bring happiness, or as it's known in the Pali language, Dittamasa Pasidati. Hearing Dhamma sermons will wake us up to the reality of life in the world, shaking our mind out of obsession with sensuality, vengeance, and aggression, while making it clearer to us where our weaknesses lie, and boost our morale, giving us the means by which we can move past the source of suffering, so that we can attain successively higher levels of happiness as we reach towards the path and fruit of nirvana. And in conclusion, the Buddha told us in the Samyutta Nikaya that, O you who see the danger in the cycle of existence, in whatsoever era the noble disciples hear the Dharma, allowing it to seep to the very marrow of their bones, to the innermost part of their mind, and who muster all of their encouragement, bending their ears to listen to the Dharma in earnest, in that era their 5 hindrances will be overcome, and their 7 factors of enlightenment will be brought to completion through the power of their meditation. Furthermore, it turns out that the benefits of listening to Dharma teachings don't run out at the end of the present life, but they carry over into future lifetimes as well. By listening to Dhamma sermons, even though we might not immediately understand everything we hear, nonetheless, wisdom will form positive predispositions in our character in the long term. Such deeply rooted habits become like bedrock for the mind. Gradually, we will start to build up familiarity with the technical vocabulary associated with the Dharma, even if we're not sure of the meaning. We might not know the meaning of the chanting, but before long we have a passing acquaintance with the Pali words. Such predispositions will be like a down payment on future cultivation of good deeds by accelerating our attainment of wisdom, our ability to teach others, recognizing the message of the Dharma when we hear it in the future, and being easily reawakened to the value of Dharma teachings. To deal with each of these future benefits in turn, the first benefit of listening to Dhamma teachings for lifetimes to come will be accelerated attainment of wisdom. In subsequent lifetimes, one will attain wisdom quickly and with ease, being better able to recall and apply the wisdom of Dharma, allowing attainment of the path and fruit of nirvana more quickly. The second benefit of listening to Dharma teachings for lifetimes to come will be ability to teach. In subsequent lifetimes, since one has an underlying gift for the Dharma, it will be easier to teach it and explain it to others. The third benefit of listening to Dhamma teachings for lifetimes to come will be recognition of the Dharma message. In subsequent lifetimes, even if you can't personally remember items of the Dharma oneself, but hearing those teachings from others will trigger one's attainment of the path and fruit of nirvana, and one's understanding will be thorough and free of doubt. Like a person who has heard the sound of a drum once before, even if much later, after a journey of many miles, they hear a similar sound again, they will immediately recognize it as the sound of a drum. It would be hard for anyone to persuade such a person that what they're listening to is not a drum. The fourth and final benefit of listening to Dhamma teachings for lifetimes to come would be being easily reawakened to the value of Dharma teachings. In subsequent lifetimes, even if one can no longer remember the Dharma one has learned, and even if there's no one to teach it, but on hearing only a few words of advice from others, or perhaps even overhearing such advice, it will bring back one's former knowledge of Dharma, easily allowing one to attain the path and fruit of nirvana with ease. Those who know the morning and evening chanting by heart, even without the meaning translated, will gain peace of mind and a familiarity with the Pali turns of phrase, so that just overhearing the same sound in the future will access our previous disposition to allow us to build upon this as we pick up on our journey towards nirvana. So for today, I'd like to finish by telling you a story about a lady who was extremely devoted to hearing Dharma teachings, a habit which brought benefit to her and those around her in that particular lifetime. The lady's name was Kururagharikā, although she is sometimes known as Kali, and she was a devout supporter of the Buddha and the mother of a monk called Sona Kutikana Thera, so we'll call him Sona for short. On one occasion, the monk Sona was passing through his hometown, and on her way back from the Jetavana monastery, Kururagharikā met her son, the monk, and organized a grand charity event in his honor. Having heard that her son could expound the Dharma very well, she requested him to give a discourse. Sona complied with her request, and so she built a pavilion especially for the purpose. A large crowd, including his mother, turned up to listen to the Dharma expounded by Sona. However, when she was at the pavilion listening to the sermon, some thieves broke into her house. Meanwhile, the leader of the thieves went to the pavilion to keep watch on the owner of the house. His intention was to attack Kururagharikā if she should return home early on learning about the theft taking place in her house. Right on cue, the maid left behind to guard the house went to the pavilion to inform her about the thieves breaking in. But the lady only said, "Let the thieves take all my money, I don't care, but don't come and disturb me while I'm listening to the Dharma." Having reprimanded her, she sent the maid home. The leader of the thieves, who was sitting close by, overheard everything. Her words also made him think If we steal the property of this wise and pious lady, we will surely be punished. We might even be struck by lightning. The leader of the thieves got so anxious that he hurried back to the house and ordered his fellow thieves to put back all the things they'd taken. The gang of thieves then returned to the pavilion to listen to the Dharma. It turned out that Sona's Dhamma teaching went on right through the night to finish at the crack of dawn, and by that time the leader and all the thieves had admitted their mistakes and requested for the lady's forgiveness. Being a kind and devout lady, she pardoned them all. Realizing the evil of their ways, all the thieves chose to join the monastic community. After receiving instructions from Sona, the new bhikkhus went into the forest to practice meditation, and the Buddha, knowing their mental attitudes, sent forth his radiance and exhorted them until they all ended up becoming enlightened. So this session I have introduced to you Blessing 26 on regular listening to the Dharma. For my next live session online, which will, fingers crossed, be a week on Sunday morning, we'll move on to the first blessing of the 8th group with the Blessing 27 on patience. For good measure, I'd like to remind viewers that you can email your questions about meditation or what you've heard in the lecture to the email address that you can see spelled out on the slide, and I will do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency as we continue to deal with the knock-on health and social effects of the pandemic. Maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will not only have benefited from hearing the Dharma, but also realize how these benefits are brought to you both in this lifetime and the next. So for today, this is me, Phra Nicholas, signing off for now. So long, folks, and stay safe.